At 36 years old, Raymond Davis, a man with kind eyes and hands calloused from both lab work and home repairs, made $49,000 a year. It was a respectable salary for a lab technician in Detroit, enough for the mortgage on their modest house in East English Village, enough for groceries, enough for the quiet, ordered life he thought he was building. It was not, however, enough for the life his wife, Sandra, was actually living. He just didn't know it yet. The first hint of the deep, corrosive disconnect in his marriage didn't come from a stray credit card bill or a whispered rumor. It came from the person he loved most in the world, his 7-year-old son, Eli. It was 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. A raw, wet wind whipped off the Detroit River, rattling the windows of the number 9 bus as it rumbled down Gratiot Avenue. Raymond sat on a cold, cracked vinyl seat, his work bag clutched in his lap. His body ached with a fatigue that went bone deep. This was the end of a 14-hour day, an 8-hour shift at the lab, a 2-hour commute, and 4 hours of overtime he'd picked up to try and get ahead, or, more accurately, to try and stop falling so far behind. When he finally turned his key in the lock of his own front door at 11:12 p.m., the house was dark and silent. He slipped off his worn, water-stained work boots, a pair of $120 Timberlands he'd had for 6 years, and padded silently upstairs. The door to Eli's room was cracked open, a sliver of light from the dinosaur-shaped nightlight spilling into the hall. He pushed it open gently. Eli was sitting up in bed, his small face etched with worry, his hair in the neat twists Sandra had painstakingly done over the weekend, each one a perfect, tight coil. "Hey, buddy," Raymond whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion. "What are you doing up so late?" Eli's lower lip trembled. "I waited for you, Daddy." A familiar pang of guilt, sharp and acidic, shot through Raymond's chest. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, the springs of the $400 mattress groaning in protest. He reached out to smooth Eli's hair, but his son flinched back, wrinkling his nose. And then came the words. The innocent, devastating question that would echo in his mind for months. "Daddy?" Eli asked, his voice small and serious. "Why do you always smell like the bus?" Raymond froze. He smelled like the bus, like damp wool coats, the stale cigarette smoke that clung to the fabric of the seats, the faint chemical scent of disinfectant, and the metallic tang of the handrails. He smelled like strangers and exhaustion. He smelled like his sacrifice. He took the bus every day, a 2-hour round trip so that Sandra could have the car. The 2021 Honda CR-V, a pearlescent white SUV that cost them $450 a month, a payment that often made their joint account gasp for air. He did it so she wouldn't have to wait at a bus stop in the rain, so she could easily get to her part-time job at a boutique, and most importantly, so she could attend her book club meetings in Grosse Pointe without the indignity of public transportation. He looked at his son, this beautiful black boy with his luminous, deep brown skin and questioning eyes, and felt a profound sense of failure. He had structured his entire life around an act of service he thought was noble, and to his child, it just made him smell bad. "The bus has a funny smell, huh, buddy?" Raymond said, forcing a light tone. "I'll have to take an extra long shower tomorrow." He tucked Eli in, kissed his forehead, and backed out of the room, closing the door softly. He stood in the hallway, the weight of those 4 words, "smell like the bus," pressing down on him. He had no idea then, standing in his quiet hallway at nearly midnight, that the smell was the least of it. He had no idea that in the circles his wife traveled in, he wasn't just the man who smelled like the bus. He was the man who was too broke to drive, and she was the one saying it. This is a story about the quiet sacrifices we make for love and the deafening cruelty that can hide behind a perfect smile. It's about a man who gave up his time, his comfort, and his money, all for a woman who saw his sacrifice not as a gift, but as a punchline. But what happens when the punchline gets recorded? What do you think happens when a good man, pushed too far, stops being quiet? Stick with me, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. The facade of their life was built on a foundation of Raymond's paychecks and Sandra's aspirations. Their home in East English Village was a tidy brick bungalow they'd bought for $185,000 8 years ago. The $1,200 monthly mortgage payment was their biggest expense, a constant, immovable anchor in their financial sea. To Raymond, the house was a haven, a place of warmth and love. Only its value measured in the height chart he'd penciled onto Eli's doorframe and the scent of the rose bushes he tended in the small backyard garden. To Sandra, the house was a stepping stone. It was nice, but it wasn't Grosse Pointe. Their days fell into a rhythm dictated by Raymond's sacrifice. At 6:15 a.m., his $89 Timex watch would beep, and he'd slide out of bed, careful not to wake Sandra. He'd shower, dress in his simple uniform of khaki pants and a polo shirt, and then head to the kitchen. The first act of his day was always for his son. He'd pack Eli's lunch, a turkey and cheese sandwich on whole wheat, a bag of baby carrots, an apple, and a small carton of juice. He'd write a note on the napkin, "Have a great day, superstar. Love, Daddy," and place the $35 Spider-Man lunchbox by the door. By 7 a.m., he'd be walking the 3 blocks to the bus stop on Cadio Road, his travel mug of coffee, brewed at home for about 30 cents a cup, warm in his hand. The bus ride was his time to decompress, to read, to listen to podcasts about science or history. He framed it as productive time, a way to make the sacrifice feel less like a loss. Sandra's day started 2 hours later. She would wake up around 8 a.m., put on her $150 Lululemon workout gear, and drive Eli to school in the gleaming white Honda CR-V. The school was only a 10-minute walk away, but Sandra insisted on driving. "It's about efficiency, Ray," she'd said when he first questioned it. "And besides, what if it rains?" The car was the centerpiece of her carefully constructed image. It was always spotless, even the interior smelling of the $12 vanilla bean air freshener she bought weekly. It was her chariot to her part-time job at a high-end clothing boutique, where she worked 3 days a week and spent most of her earnings on discounted merchandise. It was her transport to lunches with her friends, women she'd met through the boutique, who lived in sprawling $890,000 colonial homes in Grosse Pointe Park. "Did I tell you? Jessica just had her kitchen redone," she'd announce over dinner. A simple pasta dish Raymond had cooked. White marble countertops, a wolf range, must have cost $100,000 easily. Raymond would nod, pushing pasta around his plate. "That's nice, honey." He was thinking about the dripping faucet in their bathroom that he needed to fix, a $5 washer, and 30 minutes of his time. The financial details of their life were a constant, quiet tug-of-war. Raymond was a man of spreadsheets and budgets. He knew that after the mortgage, and the $450 car payment, their $600 monthly grocery bill, and utilities, his $49,000 salary left very little room for error. He tracked every penny. Sandra, on the other hand, treated money as an abstract concept, something that should simply be there when she needed it. Early in their marriage, they had a joint account for household expenses, but arguments became frequent. "What is this $280 charge at Saks?" Raymond had asked one evening, looking at a bank statement. "Oh, that was for my new dress for the charity gala," Sandra said, as if it were obvious. "I can't wear the same thing twice, Ray. People notice." "Sandra, this was our grocery money for the next 2 weeks." Her face had hardened. "Don't be so dramatic. We'll figure it out." You can always pick up an extra shift. To keep the peace, they'd made a new arrangement 4 years ago. Raymond would manage the core household bills from his direct deposit. He would then transfer a set amount. It started at $1,200 and slowly crept up to $1,800 a month into Sandra's personal account. This was supposed to be for her gas, her personal needs, and her share of the discretionary spending. It was, in Raymond's mind, a compromise. A way to give her the autonomy she craved while he maintained control over their essential finances. He had no idea how wrong he was. He saw it as a sacrifice for peace. She saw it as her allowance, an allowance she supplemented by dipping into their joint savings account, the one Raymond was painstakingly trying to build for Eli's future. He thought the constant transfers were a solution. In reality, they were becoming a meticulously documented record of his own fleecing. Each transfer was a line item, a date-stamped, dollar-tagged piece of evidence in a case he didn't even know was being built against him. He was paying for the car, for the gas she put in it, and for the privilege of taking the bus, all while she laughed about it behind his back. The facade of domestic normalcy was perfect, polished, and paid for entirely by him. The betrayal wasn't a single, cataclysmic event. It was a slow erosion, a death by 1,000 cuts, each one a small, dismissive comment or a casual act of financial cruelty that left Raymond feeling a little more exhausted, a little more invisible. And the outrage accumulated in him like a static charge, building silently until it was ready to arc. The first major jolt came on a Saturday afternoon, about 3 years into his bus riding sentence. Sandra came home from a shopping trip, her arms laden with glossy bags. She floated into the living room, where Raymond was on the floor helping Eli build a complex Lego spaceship, a $90 set he'd saved for months to buy for his son's birthday. "Look what I found," she announced, pulling a black leather purse from a bag. It was a Kate Spade, sleek and elegant. It was on sale. I couldn't resist. Raymond looked at the purse, then at his wife's beaming face. He knew that brand. He'd seen it in the windows of stores he'd never dream of entering. "On sale? How much?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. 50% off. "Only $400, she said, as if she'd discovered a gold nugget. $400. That was their emergency fund for the month. That was 2 weeks of groceries. That was the cost of the new brake pads the CRV desperately needed, a repair he was planning to do himself that weekend with $80 parts from AutoZone to save money. "Sandra," he began, his voice tight, "we talked about this. We can't afford that." Her smile vanished, replaced by a familiar, defensive glare. "We can't afford it? Or you can't afford it?" "I work too, Raymond. I'm allowed to have nice things. Don't try to make me feel guilty just because you're happy with your cheap watch and your $20 sneakers." She gestured dismissively at his $89 Timex and the comfortable but worn New Balance sneakers on his feet. Eli looked up from his Legos, his eyes wide, sensing the tension. "Mommy, is Daddy mad?" Sandra swooped down and scooped Eli into a hug. "No, sweetie. Daddy's just tired from his long bus rides." The words were coated in sugar, but the jab was clear. It was a reminder of his place, of the sacrifice she'd twisted into a weakness. Raymond fell silent, the Lego spaceship feeling suddenly heavy and pointless in his hands. That night, to avoid another fight, he logged into their banking app and saw the $400 charge. And right below it, he made his monthly transfer to her account, $1,500. He labeled it, as always, Sandra's monthly. A few months later, the emergency trips began. She called him from work, her voice a frantic whisper. "Ray, honey, I'm in a bit of a jam. Jessica and Lauren are planning a spa weekend in Traverse City. It's Lauren's birthday. And then I'd feel terrible if I missed it. I just need a little extra to cover the hotel. Maybe $800? 800? Sandra, we don't have it. The property taxes are due next month. I'll pay it back, I swear, she pleaded. I'll pick up extra shifts at the boutique. Please, Ray. I never get to do anything like this. He knew she wouldn't pay it back. He knew the extra shifts would never materialize. But the thought of another fight, of the cold silence that would follow, was more exhausting than the thought of the money. He relented. Fine. I'll transfer it from the savings. He did it, feeling a sick pit in his stomach. He was enabling her. He was funding the very lifestyle that made her look down on him. The savings account, their supposed safety net, now had a balance of just $1,245. He had started it with a $5,000 inheritance from his grandmother. He felt a wave of shame, as if he'd betrayed his grandmother's memory. The public humiliations were worse. They were at a summer block party in their neighborhood. Raymond was manning the grill, flipping burgers, feeling relaxed and happy for the first time in weeks. He was talking to a neighbor, Mark, about a classic car Mark was restoring. Sandra drifted over, a glass of white wine in her hand, looking radiant in a $300 sundress. Mark's wife, Chloe, smiled warmly at Raymond. Sandra was just telling me you take the bus to work every day, Ray. That's so admirable. Great for the environment. Before Raymond could respond, Sandra let out a tinkling laugh. Oh, you know, Ray, she said, patting his arm in a way that was both affectionate and deeply condescending. He loves his me time on the bus. He says it's where he does his best thinking. A real man of the people. The words hung in the air. The tone, the look in her eye. It was a performance for her audience. She was framing his sacrifice as a quirky, slightly pathetic choice, not a necessity driven by her own demands. Raymond felt his face flush with heat from the grill, or maybe from shame. He just nodded, flipped a burger, and said nothing. He saw the flicker of pity in Chloe's eyes before she quickly changed the subject. The financial bleed continued, a steady, relentless drain. The CRV needed new tires. Raymond researched and found a highly rated set of all-season tires at Bell Tire for $600 installed. Sandra wouldn't hear of it. No, we're getting them from the Honda dealership, she insisted. Frien, they use the original manufacturer's brand. It's about safety, Raymond, and it maintains the car's value. The dealership quoted him $1,150. They argued for 2 days. In the end, Raymond paid the $1,150 from their savings account, which now dwindled to a terrifying 3-digit number. He felt a cold dread creep into his heart. They were one unexpected bill away from disaster. He started taking every overtime shift offered. He'd come home long after Eli was asleep, his body humming with exhaustion, and find Sandra on the couch, scrolling through her phone. A half-empty glass of wine on the $250 crate and barrel end table beside her. One night, he arrived home at 11:30 p.m. to find the house smelling of roasted chicken and garlic. Sandra was in the kitchen, her face a mask of fury. "Where have you been?" she snapped. "I cooked. Jessica and her husband were supposed to come over for dinner. I had to cancel an hour ago because you weren't here. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is?" Raymond stared at her, bewildered. "You didn't tell me you were having people over?" "I shouldn't have to. I sent you a text this afternoon." He pulled out his phone. There it was, a text from 3 p.m. "Jess and Todd for dinner tonight at 8. Don't be late." He'd been in the middle of a critical sample run at the lab, his phone in his locker. He hadn't seen it. "Sandra, I was at work. I was working overtime so we can pay the credit card bill you ran up last month." "Oh, here we go," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's always about money with you. You know what your problem is, Raymond? You have no ambition. You're content to just be, to take your little bus and work in your little lab. Some of us want more out of life. That was the line that broke something in him. His little lab, his little life, a life dedicated to supporting her. The anger that had been simmering for years finally boiled over, but it didn't come out as a shout. It came out as a quiet, chilling calm. "I'm going to bed," he said, turning his back on her, and the expensive, uneaten chicken. He lay in the dark, listening to her cleaning up, slamming cabinets. He thought about the numbers. 4 years, 48 monthly transfers, an average of about $1,500 a month, plus the emergencies, the tires, the trips. He did a rough calculation in his head. It was an astronomical sum. It was a down payment on a house in Grosse Pointe. It was a college fund. It was a life. A life he was working to death for, while she called it little. The outrage was no longer a spark. It was a steady, burning flame. He just needed proof. He needed something more than just the numbers. He needed to hear it in her own voice. He had no idea how soon he would get his wish. The proof arrived on a Saturday that felt like any other. It was May 21st, 2:38 p.m. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the scent of freshly cut grass hung in the air of East English Village. Raymond was on his knees in the front garden, methodically pulling weeds from around the base of his prize-winning rose bushes. His hands, covered in dirt, felt more at peace here than they did anywhere else. Eli was running through the sprinkler in the backyard, his happy shrieks echoing down the block. It was a perfect, peaceful, domestic scene. Then he saw Mrs. Gable walking across the lawn towards him. Mrs. Gable was their next-door neighbor, a retired school teacher in her late 70s, with sharp eyes and a kind heart. She'd lived in her house for 50 years and had seen the neighborhood change around her. She had always been fond of Raymond, often leaving a plate of cookies on their porch or waving to him as he walked to the bus stop in the pre-dawn darkness. She adored Eli. Her interactions with Sandra, however, were always brief and polite, tinged with a formality that Raymond had never quite understood. Today she wasn't smiling. She held her iPhone in her hand, clutching it like a weapon. Her face was a mixture of anger and deep unease. "Raymond," she said, her voice low, "I need to talk to you for a moment." He stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Gable?" She glanced back towards her house, then at Raymond's. "Is she home? Sandra?" "No, she's at her book club meeting in Grosse Pointe." Mrs. Gable nodded slowly, a grim certainty settling on her features. "I thought so." "Raymond, I have something you need to hear. I don't want to be the one to do this, I truly don't, but I can't, in good conscience, stay silent." She explained that she had been sitting on her screened-in porch, reading. A car had pulled up in front of Raymond's house. Not the CR-V, but a sleek, black $90,000 Mercedes SUV he didn't recognize. Sandra had gotten out of the passenger side with 2 other women. They were waiting for a third friend to arrive, laughing and talking loudly by the open car door, their voices carrying clearly across the quiet street. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," Mrs. Gable said, her gaze fixed on her own pristine hydrangeas. "But they were so loud, and what I heard, it made my blood run cold." She had felt so appalled, so certain that Raymond needed to know, that she had discreetly unlocked her phone and started a voice memo. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and held out her phone. Raymond's heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. He took the phone. Mrs. Gable's finger hovered over the screen and then pressed play. The recording was shockingly clear. The first sound was the clinking of what sounded like wine glasses, followed by a burst of high-pitched female laughter. A voice he didn't recognize said, I still can't believe you let him keep taking the bus. Doesn't Raymond mind you having the car all the time? Then came Sandra's voice. It was light, airy, and dripping with a casual, performative cruelty he had only ever seen hints of. It was her gross point voice. "Oh, honey, please," she laughed. The sound was brittle, artificial. "He's too broke to drive. What's he gonna do? Put gas in it with his lunch money." More laughter from the friends. One of them snorted. Sandra continued, her voice gaining confidence, playing to her audience. "He knows his place. Honestly, it's better this way. It keeps the bus smell out of my car." The final word, car, was followed by a peal of collective, vicious laughter. Then the sound of another car door opening and closing, and the memo ended. Raymond stood completely still in his garden, the sun warm on his back, the phone in his dirt-caked hand. The world seemed to shrink until it was only the size of that recording. The sounds of his son laughing in the sprinkler, the buzz of a distant lawnmower, the gentle breeze, it all faded into a roaring silence in his ears. Too broke to drive, knows his place, the bus smell, every sacrifice, every exhausting overtime shift, every lonely bus ride in the dark, every dollar he had transferred, every time he'd swallowed his pride. It all coalesced into those three phrases. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete and utter negation of his entire existence as a husband and a partner. He wasn't a man making a sacrifice for his family. In her eyes, and in the eyes of her friends, he was a joke. A pathetic, smelly, broke joke. He felt a strange and terrible calm settle over him. There was no rage, no tears, just a cold, hard clarity. The facade had been ripped away, and what lay beneath was uglier than he could have ever imagined. He looked at Mrs. Gable, her face full of pity and concern. Can you send me that?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Of course, dear." He watched as she navigated her phone, and a moment later, his own phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled out his $450 iPhone SE, a model 3 generations old, and saw the file appear. He saved it immediately. He saved it to his phone, to his cloud storage, and emailed it to himself. He saved it like it was the most valuable thing he owned, because it was. It was his freedom. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of its strength back. "You have no idea what you've just done for me." She patted his arm. "A good man deserves respect, Raymond. Don't you ever forget that." She turned and walked back to her house. Raymond stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of his wife's laughter in his head. The war was over. He had lost. But the battle for his life was just about to begin. The hours after hearing the voice memo were the strangest of Raymond's life. He was a man hollowed out, every emotion scoured clean, replaced by a singular, icy purpose. The key was to do nothing, to change nothing. He had to become a ghost in his own life, an actor playing the part of the dutiful, oblivious husband one last time. Strategic restraint. That was the new mantra. He finished weeding the garden, his movements mechanical. He turned off the sprinkler and wrapped a towel around a shivering, laughing Eli. He made them both peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for a late lunch. Every action was deliberate, a step in a dance he was choreographing in his head. Sandra came home at 6:15 p.m., floating in on a cloud of expensive perfume and self-satisfaction. The CRV glided silently into the driveway. She walked in, kissed Eli's head, and gave Raymond a perfunctory peck on the cheek. "Hey, hun, long day," she said, dropping her $400 Kate Spade purse on the counter. You would not believe the drama with Lauren's new au pair. Raymond, who was washing dishes at the sink, turned and gave her a small, tired smile. It was the best performance of his life. Oh yeah? Tell me about it. As she recounted the trivial dramas of her Grosse Pointe friends, Raymond listened, nodded, and asked questions. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. He saw her not as his wife, but as a subject. Every word, every gesture was data. He was a lab technician after all. He knew how to observe, document, and analyze. That night, after Sandra was asleep, her breathing deep, and even beside him, he slipped out of bed. He went to his small desk in the corner of the living room, the one with the second-hand $50 chair, and turned on his laptop. The real work began. The next morning, he put the first part of his plan into motion. Over breakfast, pancakes he'd made from scratch, he adopted a tone of sincere, slightly overwhelmed concern. "Sandra," he began, pouring her a cup of coffee, "I've been thinking a lot lately about our finances, about the future, for Eli." He let that hang in the air. Eli was always the key. She looked up from her phone, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "What about them?" "We're fine." "Are we?" he asked gently. "I feel like we're always just getting by." "I was thinking, maybe I should take one of those online financial planning courses, to get us on solid ground, learn about investing, that kind of thing." This was the lie. It was a brilliant lie because it was wrapped in the costume of the very thing she accused him of lacking: ambition. He was proposing to be better with money, to be more. She shrugged, intrigued despite herself. "Okay. And?" "Well, to do it right, the first step is always to get a full picture of where everything is going. I'd need to gather all our bank statements from the last few years, joint accounts, savings, your personal account, my personal account, all of it, just to put it all into a spreadsheet and see where we stand." He held his breath. Now he was asking for the keys to the kingdom. Sandra considered it for a moment, then waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Whatever you need to do, Ray. Knock yourself out. Just don't start messing with my monthly spending money. I have that budgeted out." Budgeted out. The irony was so thick he could have choked on it. "Of course not," he said, his face a perfect mask of earnestness. "This is just about getting organized." For the next week, Raymond lived a double life. By day, he was the same old Raymond. He took the bus. He worked his shifts. He packed Eli's lunch. He made dinner. He listened to Sandra's stories about her friends' fabulous lives. By night, after she and Eli were asleep, he became a forensic accountant. He logged into their online banking portals. He downloaded 4 years of statements. PDF after PDF piled up in a folder on his desktop labeled Financial Planning. He printed every single one. The stack of paper grew to be 6 inches high. He bought a new pack of highlighters. With a grim, methodical precision, he began to trace the money. Yellow was for his bi-weekly paycheck deposit. Blue was for his transfer to Sandra's personal account. He created a table. Date, amount, memo. The list grew longer and longer. January 15th, 2018, $1,200, Sandra's monthly. February 15th, 2018, $1,200, Sandra's monthly. June 15th, 2020, $1,500, Sandra's monthly. May 15th, 2022, $1,800, Sandra's monthly. Pink was for any transfer from their joint savings account to her personal account. These were the emergencies. August 3rd, 2019, $800. Weekend trip. November 21st, 2020, $1,150. Car tires. March 10th through 2021, $1,500. Dental work. He later learned this was for veneers. Then he opened her personal account statements. He used a red highlighter for every purchase over $200. The pages bled red. Charges from Saks Fifth Avenue, Nordstrom, Lululemon. Charges from spas in Traverse City and wineries on the Leelanau Peninsula. Charges for $250 haircuts and $150 bottles of wine at Grosse Pointe restaurants. He built a master spreadsheet. He tallied the blue column, the 48 monthly transfers. The subtotal was $71,400. He tallied the pink column, the savings account raids. That came to $4,912.45. The grand total stared back at him from the screen, stark and unforgiving. $76,312.45. $76,000. Almost 2 years of his entire gross salary gone. Vaporized into purses, vacations, and wine. All so she could maintain a facade for women who despised him on her behalf. He sat back in his $50 chair, the house silent around him. He wasn't angry anymore. He was cold. He was a scientist who had just confirmed his hypothesis with overwhelming, irrefutable data. The playing dumb phase was over. It was time to find a lawyer. Finding the right lawyer was the most critical next step. Raymond knew he couldn't walk into one of the massive glass and steel law firms downtown. He couldn't afford their retainers, and he didn't trust their slick, corporate polish. He needed someone who understood the grit of Detroit, someone sharp, efficient, and unintimidated by Grosse Pointe money or attitude. After 2 days of quiet, careful research during his lunch breaks, he found her. Miss Imani Carter. Her office was in a restored historic building on the Avenue of Fashion. The website was simple, professional, and her bio was direct. A graduate of the University of Michigan Law School, with 15 years of experience in family law, specializing in complex financial disputes. Her photo showed a poised, intelligent black woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense expression. Raymond felt an immediate sense of trust. He called and made an appointment, using a precious vacation day for the meeting. He told Sandra he had a mandatory safety seminar at work. The lies were becoming easier, a necessary armor. Ms. Carter's office was not what he expected. It was warm and inviting, decorated with vibrant art by local Detroit artists. The only thing imposing about the room was the woman herself. She sat behind a large, uncluttered mahogany desk, her posture perfect, her gaze direct. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice smooth and measured. "Thank you for coming in. My paralegal said you have a matter involving dissipation of marital assets. Please, tell me what's going on." Raymond took a deep breath. He opened his worn leather briefcase, a gift from his parents when he graduated from college, and laid his evidence on her desk. He didn't start with the story. He started with the data. First, he presented the master spreadsheet, a single, damning page, summarizing 4 years of financial drain. "This is a summary of all transfers made from my accounts to my wife's and from our joint savings to her personal account over the past 48 months. The total is $76,312. Ms. Carter took the page, her eyes scanning the columns. She raised an eyebrow slightly but said nothing. Next, he produced the binders. "This is the backup," he said, pushing 2 thick, 3-ring binders across the desk. "Volume 1 contains my personal and our joint account statements with every transfer highlighted. Volume 2 contains my wife's personal account statements with her corresponding spending highlighted." She opened one of the binders, flipping through the pages, her expression unreadable. She saw the meticulous highlighting, the neat tabs, the sheer volume of documentation. He could see a flicker of professional respect in her eyes. "You've been thorough," she commented, her tone dry. "I'm a lab technician," Raymond replied. "I document everything." He let her absorb the financial data for a full minute. He let the weight of the numbers sink in. Then, he played his final card. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice dropping. "This is the context." He took out his phone and a small $30 Bluetooth speaker he'd bought for this exact purpose. He placed the speaker in the center of her desk. "This is a voice recording," he explained. "It was taken 3 weeks ago by my neighbor. It features my wife and her friends." He pressed play. The bright, cruel sound of Sandra's voice filled the quiet office. The clinking glasses. The laughter. "Oh, honey, please. He's too broke to drive." "What's he gonna do? Put gas in it with his lunch money?" "He knows his place. It keeps the bus smell out of my car." As the recording played, Ms. Carter's face remained impassive, but her eyes hardened. It was the look of a predator spotting a weakness in its prey. When the memo ended, a heavy silence descended on the room. She finally looked up at Raymond, and for the first time he saw not just a lawyer, but an ally. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice now carrying a steely edge. "This is not just a case of irresponsible spending. The legal term for this is dissipation of marital assets, and it's a serious breach of fiduciary duty. But that recording, that changes everything. It proves intent. It proves malice. It's character evidence of the most powerful kind. It's devastating." She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. "Your wife and her attorney will expect a standard divorce proceeding. A fight over the house, custody, maybe some alimony. They will not be expecting this. They will not be prepared for an ambush of meticulously documented financial abuse backed by audio evidence of her contempt for you." Raymond felt a surge of validation so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't just being sensitive. This was real. "What do we do?" he asked. "We don't go to court. Not yet," Ms. Carter said, a strategic glint in her eye. "Court is public, and it's slow. We request mandatory mediation. It's a private, controlled environment. We let her walk in there feeling confident, arrogant even. We let her make her outrageous demands, and then we detonate this. We present the financials, and then we play that recording for her, her lawyer, and the mediator." She explained the strategy. The shock and humiliation would be total. Her lawyer, and faced with evidence that would make his client look like a monster in open court, would have no choice but to advise her to settle immediately, and on their terms. "My billing rate is $450 an hour," she stated. "We will ask for your legal fees to be paid by her as part of the settlement. Our terms will be simple and non-negotiable. A full judgment against her for the $76,000 she dissipated. Full ownership of the marital home and the Honda CR-V to you. No alimony. We will be generous with a shared custody arrangement for your son because he is the priority." Raymond nodded, his mind clear. "Let's do it." He left Ms. Carter's office and walked into the bright afternoon sun, feeling lighter than he had in years. The weight of his secret was no longer his alone to bear. It was now a weapon, and it was aimed, loaded, and ready to be fired. The day of the mediation was a cool, overcast morning in late June. Raymond woke up at 5 a.m., long before his alarm. He felt no anxiety, no fear, only a profound and unnerving calm. He showered, dressed in the best suit he owned, a simple, charcoal gray suit from Jaws. A bank that he'd bought for a wedding 5 years ago for $350, and went downstairs. He packed Eli's lunch just like any other day. The routine grounded him. He met Ms. Carter in the lobby of a neutral office building in Southfield at 8:45 a.m. The mediation was scheduled for 9. She was wearing a sharp, dark blue power suit, her demeanor radiating a quiet, formidable confidence. She carried a slim, leather-bound portfolio. "Ready?" she asked him. "Ready," he confirmed. They rode the elevator in silence to the 12th floor. The mediation center was a space of hushed tones, frosted glass, and expensive minimalist furniture. It was designed to project an aura of calm, rational resolution. Today it would be a slaughterhouse. They were shown to Conference Room B. It was a sterile box with a long, polished table and 12 chairs. A wall of glass offered a panoramic, if distant view of the Detroit skyline. The glass towers seemed to mock the intimacy of the conflict about to unfold. Sandra and her lawyer arrived at 9:05 a.m. She swept in, wearing a cream-colored Armani suit that Raymond instantly knew cost at least $2,000. She looked annoyed, impatient, as if this were an inconvenient interruption to her day. She barely glanced at Raymond, offering him a curt, dismissive nod before taking a seat opposite him. Her lawyer, a man in his 50s with a florid face and an overly friendly demeanor, started shuffling papers. The mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Harrison, entered and laid out the ground rules. He was calm, professional, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "All right," Mr. Harrison began. "Mrs. Davis, perhaps you and your counsel could start by outlining your desired outcome from today's session." Sandra's lawyer cleared his throat. "Certainly. My client Sandra is seeking a fair and equitable division of assets. We are proposing she retain the marital home, as it provides stability for the child, Eli. She will also require the 2021 Honda CR-V for transportation. Further, given the disparity in earning potential and Mr. Davis's stable income, we are requesting alimony in the amount of $2,000 per month for a period of 5 years to allow my client to maintain the lifestyle to which she and the child are accustomed." Raymond felt a flicker of the old anger, but he pushed it down. He looked at Ms. Carter, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Let them talk. Let them build the pedestal higher before we kick it out from under them. When her lawyer finished, the mediator turned to them. "Ms. Carter, your response?" Imani Carter leaned forward, a picture of calm professionalism. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. We appreciate counsel's proposal. However, our position is substantially different. Before we discuss assets like the home or alimony, we must first address the significant and systematic dissipation of marital assets by Mrs. Davis over the past 4 years." Sandra's head snapped up. She shot a confused, angry look at her lawyer. "What is she talking about?" she hissed. Ms. Carter ignored her and slid 3 identical binders across the polished table, one for the mediator, one for Sandra, and one for her stunned-looking attorney. "If you'll turn to Exhibit A," Ms. Carter said, her voice even and clear, "you will find a spreadsheet summarizing 48 consecutive monthly transfers from Mr. Davis's accounts to Mrs. Davis's personal account, as well as several large sum transfers from the couple's joint savings. The total amount dissipated, not including interest, is $76,312.45. Sandra's lawyer fumbled with the binder, his face turning a shade redder. Sandra stared at the spreadsheet, her mouth slightly agape. "Those were our expenses. I managed our budget. I paid for groceries, for Eli's clothes." "Did you?" Ms. Carter said softly. She gestured to the binder. "Because if you turn to Exhibit B, you'll find 4 years of your personal bank statements. We've taken the liberty of highlighting every purchase over $200. You'll note a significant number of charges from luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, and out-of-town resorts. For example, on page 14, we see a charge for $875 at the Grand Traverse Resort and Spa. The same week, Mr. Davis transferred you $800 for what you termed an emergency." Sandra's face, which had been flushed with anger, was beginning to pale. Her lawyer was flipping through the pages. his expression growing more horrified by the second. He was seeing his case and his client's credibility evaporate in real time. This is an invasion of my privacy, Sandra sputtered, looking at the mediator for help. Mr. Harrison held up a hand. These are discoverable financial documents in a divorce proceeding, Mrs. Davis. Ms. Carter let the silence hang for a moment, letting the weight of the paper evidence settle. Then she delivered the final, devastating blow. The numbers themselves are damning, she said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in. But they lack context. They don't explain the motivation. For that, we have Exhibit C. She reached into her portfolio and placed the small black Bluetooth speaker in the middle of the table. A knot of ice formed in Raymond's stomach. This was it. This is an audio recording made on May 21st of this year, Ms. Carter announced to the silent room. The primary speaker is your client, Mrs. Davis. She pressed the play button. The sound of Sandra's laughter, so carefree and cruel, filled the sterile conference room. The clinking of glasses sounded like tiny, shattering bells. Raymond watched his wife's face. It was a slow-motion collapse. Oh, honey, please. He's too broke to drive. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She looked at Raymond, her expression a frantic plea. He met her gaze without flinching, his face a mask of cold, hard nothing. He felt nothing. He was simply an observer. What's he going to do, put gas in it with his lunch money? Her mouth fell open. A small, choked sound escaped her throat. Her lawyer had gone completely white. He's staring at the speaker as if it were a venomous snake. He knows his place. Honestly, it's better this way. It keeps the bus smell out of my car. The final peal of laughter echoed in the room and then died, leaving a silence more profound and absolute than any Raymond had ever experienced. It was the sound of a life imploding. Sandra stared at Raymond, her eyes swimming with tears of shock and humiliation. The mask was gone. All that was left was the ugly, panicked truth. Miss Carter spoke into the void, her voice quiet, but carrying the force of a battering ram. We are prepared to file a motion to have that audio entered into the public record in open court, where a judge can hear your client's contempt for the man who was working 14-hour days to fund her shopping sprees. The press, particularly the local news, tends to enjoy stories like that. She paused. Or, you can agree to our settlement terms. Today. Right now. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. A judgment against Mrs. Davis for the full $76,000. The marital home and the Honda CR-V are to be signed over to Mr. Davis, free and clear. His retirement accounts remain his, no alimony. We will draft a generous and fair 50-50 custody agreement for Eli. You have 10 minutes to decide. Sandra's lawyer didn't even look at his client. He looked at the paper, at Miss Carter's unyielding face, and at the damning binders. He knew he was utterly, completely defeated. He picked up the settlement agreement and nodded. We accept. The collapse of Sandra's world was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, systematic dismantling. It was a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the choices she had made and the cruelty she had shown. For Raymond, watching it unfold was not about revenge. It was about the cold, impartial balancing of scales. The first consequence was immediate and financial. In the mediation room, a paralegal from Ms. Carter's firm appeared with the finalized settlement documents. Sandra, her hands trembling, her face streaked with ruined mascara, signed them. With a few strokes of a pen, she was officially indebted to Raymond for $76,312.45. A judgment was filed with the court that afternoon. With her part-time job at the boutique, paying $18 an hour, it was a debt she could never hope to repay. Miss Carter immediately filed for wage garnishment. 25% of her meager paycheck would now be sent directly to Raymond, a constant, bi-weekly reminder of her betrayal. The second consequence was the car. After signing the papers, Sandra and her lawyer were left in the conference room. Raymond and Ms. Carter walked out into the lobby. A young man in a suit, another paralegal, was waiting for them, holding a folder. "Mr. Davis," he said, "here's the signed title for the 2021 Honda CR-V and the keys." He handed them over. The keys felt heavy and real in Raymond's hand. He walked out of the office building, leaving Sandra to figure out her own way home. Later, he saw the charge on their now frozen joint credit card, a $45 Uber ride. He drove the CR-V, the symbol of his long humiliation, back to his house. The vanilla bean air freshener made him feel sick. He rolled down all the windows. The third consequence was the loss of her lifestyle. The river of money, the $1,800 a month from Raymond, the secret dips into savings, was gone. Her income was now just her garnished wages, amounting to less than $1,400 a month. There would be no more spa weekends, no more $1,200 Armani suits, no more lunches at exclusive Grosse Pointe bistros. The $3,200 a month fantasy she had been living was over. Reality had arrived, and it was brutal. The fourth consequence, perhaps the most painful for her, was social. News of the settlement and the reasons for it spread like wildfire through her circle. While the audio was never made public, the details of the $76,000 judgment and her shocking cruelty were too juicy to remain secret. Her friends, the women whose approval she had craved and paid for, wanted nothing to do with the scandal. She was no longer an asset to their social standing. She was a liability, a pariah, and worse, she was broke. The invitation stopped. Her calls went unanswered. The Grosse Pointe Book Club had silently revoked her membership. The fifth consequence was her home. As per the settlement, she had 30 days to vacate the house in East English Village. She couldn't afford a decent apartment anywhere near her old life. She ended up in a cramped, $950 a month one-bedroom apartment above a pizza parlor in a less desirable suburb. The windows overlooked a noisy street and a dumpster. The contrast between this cramped, noisy box and the quiet, tree-lined street of her former life was a daily punishment. In the first week after the mediation, Raymond's phone was flooded with her voicemails. A perfect, textbook progression of emotional collapse. The first message was one of angry disbelief. "Raymond, call me. I can't believe you did this to me, to us, after everything. You blindsided me. This isn't fair." The second was justification. "Okay, I listened to that recording again. They took it out of context. It was a joke, Ray. A stupid, tasteless joke between girlfriends. You can't blow up our whole lives over a joke." The third was pleading. "Ray, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll pay the money back, I swear. I'll do anything." Don't do this to Eli. Don't take his mother away from her home. The fourth was tears. A long, rambling, sobbing message filled with self-pity. "My life is over. I have nothing. You've destroyed me. How could you be so cruel?" Raymond listened to each message once, his face impassive. He felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like watching a sad movie. This was the woman who had laughed at his sacrifice. He saved the messages to the same evidence folder as the original recording. Then he deleted them from his phone and blocked her number. All communication would now go through their lawyers. The cascade was complete. The scales were balanced. 6 months later, the world was painted in the warm, golden hues of a Detroit sunrise. At 7:30 a.m., Raymond pulled his car up to the curb in front of Eli's elementary school. It wasn't the gleaming white Honda CR-V. That vehicle, a rolling monument to 4 years of lies, was long gone. Raymond had sold it for $24,000 the week after the settlement became final. The first check he wrote was to Ms. Imani Carter for her legal fees, a total of $12,500. It was the best money he had ever spent. He put the remaining $11,500, plus along with the first few garnishment payments from Sandra, into a new, untouchable trust fund for Eli's college education. With a portion of his own savings, he had bought a different car, a 5-year-old, dark blue Honda Civic, for $16,000. It had 60,000 miles on it, a small scratch on the rear bumper, and it was the most beautiful car he had ever owned. It was his. It smelled of nothing but clean upholstery and the faint, sweet scent of the apple Eli had left on the back seat yesterday. "Okay, buddy, have a great day at school," Raymond said, turning in his seat. Eli, now a proud second grader, unbuckled his seatbelt. His hair in the same neat twists Raymond had learned to do himself by watching YouTube tutorials bounced as he leaned forward to show his dad a piece of paper. "Look what I made in art class." "But Daddy!" It was a drawing done in thick, bright crayon. It depicted 2 figures standing next to a lopsided blue car under a giant yellow sun. The figures were smiling. One was big, one was small. Both were colored in with a rich brown crayon. "That's you, Daddy," Eli said, pointing to the taller figure. "And that's me. And that's our car, the fast blue one." He paused, then pointed again at the drawing with a serious expression. "I used the brown crayon for our faces. Because we're black, Daddy. So I used the right color." Raymond's breath caught in his throat. He took the drawing from Eli, his fingers tracing the waxy lines. "Because we're black." In that moment, Eli had articulated a truth so simple and profound, it grounded Raymond completely. This was who they were. This was their life. Real, authentic, and colored in with the right colors. "It's the best drawing I've ever seen, superstar," Raymond said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to put it on the fridge right next to my work schedule." Eli beamed, gave his dad a quick, strong hug, and scrambled out of the car, his $40 backpack bouncing behind him. Raymond watched him run up the steps and disappear into the school building. He sat there for a moment, the drawing resting on the passenger seat, the morning sun warming his face through the windshield. For 4 years, he had believed that love was a grand, painful sacrifice. He thought providing a luxury he couldn't afford was his duty. He'd measured his worth in the things he gave up. He was so wrong. True wealth wasn't the car or the house or the number in a bank account. It was this simple, unhurried moment. The freedom to drive his son to school. The warmth of a hug. The profound pride in a child's drawing. It was the quiet dignity of a life lived honestly. A life where he no longer smelled like the bus, but simply like a father. He had lost a wife, but he had gained back his entire world. And every morning, as he started the engine of his modest blue Civic, he was reminded that the best journeys aren't the ones we suffer through for someone else, but the ones we take toward our own self-respect. We all make sacrifices for the people we love, but it's crucial to know the difference between a sacrifice that builds a future and one that just enables a lie. What are the small things in your life that you wouldn't trade for any amount of money? Let me know in the comments below. Because stories like Raymond's remind us what true value really looks like.